So, what if you could take the pulse of the entire planet, right? Just by listening to all the little signals it sends out over a single 24-hour period. I'm not talking about the big, flashy headlines. I mean the thousands of smaller decisions, the ones that really show where we're all heading. Okay, so let's dive in and see what just one day can actually tell us. Okay, let's start with this number 2,937. So, what is that? Well, in just one day, across 72 countries, that's how many distinct economic, political, and corporate signals were sent out. You can think of each one as a clue, right? A little breadcrumb? A single piece of a giant global puzzle. So when you break all those signals down, you start to see what the world is actually doing. And it really boils down to two main things. You've got new signals, that's about 40%, basically the global conversation. But look at this. The biggest piece of the pie, a whopping 58%, is procurement. Yep, just governments buying stuff. That tells us that the single most significant trackable thing happening on any given day is public spending. And that right there is a huge clue about where the world's real priorities are. Okay, so where is all this noise coming from? Well, it's pretty clear, isn't it? The United Kingdom and the United States are just dominating the field here. And if you look closely, you can see it's almost all driven by that procurement signal we were just talking about. So this basically tells us exactly where to point our magnifying glass first to figure out what's really going on. All right, let's get into our first section. We're going to follow the money. Simple as that. Let's see what the story is when we look at how the world's biggest economies are opening up their wallets. And boom, right away, you see two totally different playbooks. On one side, you have the UK, which seems really focused on things at home, upgrading their tech, fixing the roads, that kind of stuff. And then you have the US, which is looking more outward. Think defense readiness and funding some seriously advanced, highly regulated R&D for what's coming next. Yeah, this really paints the picture for the UK, doesn't it? I mean, they're looking for AI companies to help them get smarter, but in the same breath, they're buying ultrasound scanners for their hospitals and even paving local roads. It's this really practical mix of one eye on the future and one eye on just keeping the lights on and making sure the country works day to day. Now, the US spending story, it's a whole different vibe. A lot of the signals point to just maintaining military readiness, things like repairing F-16 mission computers. But then there's this other really fascinating thread, this investment in what's called regulatory science for the FDA. So what is that? It's basically the government paying for research to figure out the rules for new medical tech before that tech even exists. They're trying to get out ahead of the curve to regulate the future before it even arrives. All right, so let's switch gears. We're going to pivot away from government spending and look at the big push and pull that's shaping the entire world of technology. And for this part, we're going to zoom in on the signals coming out of Asia. And when you look at tech right now, there's one huge theme that pops up everywhere. It's this fundamental tension. On one hand, you have this mad dash to build and roll out AI as fast as possible. But at the exact same time, there's this massive push to put the brakes on, to regulate it, to control it. It's a race and a wrestling match all at once. China is a perfect case study for this. Just look at the signals. You've got Shanghai pouring something like $10 billion into high tech. But then you also see the government rolling out new rules to protect kids from AI. And at the same time, there are security signals showing increased cyber activity aimed at its neighbors. So you've got these three things happening all at once: huge investment, tight governance, and a focus on security. India's story is a little different. The signals there all seem to bunch up around this idea of finance meets regulation. So you've got this really dynamic economy, a ton of companies wanting to go public, but it's constantly bumping up against headwinds. Things like new regulations, the very real chaos caused by cyber disruptions, and just general market jitters. It's an engine of growth, but there's a lot of friction. And over in South Korea, the signals are all about a high-wire balancing act. Think about it. They're trying to navigate this tangled web of global rules just to sell their products. At the same time, they're pouring money into new cybersecurity centers to defend themselves. And on top of all that, they're having to change their own labor laws to deal with population challenges right at home. It's a real juggling act. Okay, let's head into our next section, because this is where things get really interesting. We're going to look at how all these different forces are playing out on the frontiers of finance. We're talking about how emerging markets are basically building their financial future from the ground up. First up, let's talk about Brazil. The fintech scene there is really coming of age. You have this payments giant PicPay filing to go public in the US. Now that is a huge signal. It's basically them planting a flag and saying, we're here, we're ready for the big leagues. And while they're doing that on the world stage, back home, they're also shaking things up, pushing for regulatory changes to break up the monopoly of the big app stores. Now, the story in Nigeria is all about speed, just rapid evolution. You can literally see the financial system growing up in real time, and it's happening in 3 key ways. First, you've got big fish eating smaller fish, companies merging to get stronger. Second, you see big banks confidently handling their international debt. And third, and this is really cool, you have people using digital assets, specifically stablecoins, which are just cryptocurrencies tied to something stable like the US dollar, for actual real-world stuff like getting around foreign exchange problems.
And then there's Kenya, where the signals are all about playing the long game. On one hand, you've got this super concrete physical sign of confidence. The National Social Security Fund is planning a massive twin tower development. You can't get more tangible than that. But on the other hand, you have the more abstract signal from the government basically making a promise to get its finances in order and be stable for the next decade. It's building up and buckling down at the same time.
Okay, so we've looked at all these little snapshots from all over the world, all from a single day. But what happens when you step back and connect the dots? Well, this is where the real story, the big picture, finally snaps into focus. It really boils down to 4 huge trends. Trend number 1, government spending is king. The sheer volume of procurement tells us that governments, like the UK and the US, are major players in the real economy. Trend number 2, the AI paradox. There's a simultaneous race to build it and a race to regulate it. Trend 3, cyber risk is everywhere. It's a constant threat that's forcing countries like Korea to invest and causing real problems in places like India. And finally, trend number 4, emerging markets aren't waiting around. They're actively adapting and building the next generation of financial tools, just like we saw in Brazil and Nigeria. So what's really pushing that incredible adaptation in emerging markets? Well, this quote really nails it. It's all about a higher sensitivity to the cost of capital, currency stability, and trust. Simply put, they're innovating so fast because they have to. When money is expensive and your currency is volatile, you're forced to get creative, and you're forced to build systems that people can truly trust. So think about that. This entire global story, a story of spending, of innovation, of risk, and of incredible adaptation, all of it was pieced together from the signals of just one single day. And that really leaves you with a final thought, doesn't it? If this is what one day looks like, now that you know how to listen for these signals, what story will you see the world writing tomorrow?